The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Implementation of the IEP by Shirley Swope. My name is Pam Christie, PTI Director at Peak Parent Center, and I'll be moderating this presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. If you are connected to today's webinar through the internet, you should see your attendee interface or control panel in the upper right-hand corner of your own computer's desktop. By default, you are listening in to today's webinar using your computer's speaker system. If you'd prefer to join over the phone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your control panel, and the dial-in information will be displayed. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter and myself by typing your questions into either the question pane or the chat. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and the presenter and I will be monitoring the questions and will address them as we go. Don't forget there's handouts available for download in the handout window. There's 3 of those today. And as you leave today's webinar, you will receive an evaluation about the presentation. And we would appreciate if you would just take a minute to complete that and provide your feedback. So again, welcome to today's webinar, the third part in our IEP webinar series, Implementation of the IEP. It's my pleasure to introduce Shirley, who will take it from here.
Hello, everyone. So glad you can join us today. And if you joined us last week, just know I locked the dogs in the basement. We're all working from home. So dogs are a big part of my life, and sometimes they like to express themselves, but hopefully not today. So let's get started. In our first part, we were preparing the IEP. It's what happens before the meeting and what happens to gather your data for the IEP meeting. And then last week was going through the meeting and making goals and looking at strengths and needs and things like that. And today it's the implementation and follow-up of the IEP. All 3 parts are equally important. And actually the implementation and the follow-up kind of goes into your preparing for the IEP, because you want to collect data, you want to see what works and what doesn't work. So what does the law say about implementation? And we're going to talk about that, the responsibilities of all the IEP members. Parents are equal members of the IEP team and have equal responsibilities under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Going to look at progress monitoring, and that's a great way to collect data for preparing for your annual IEP. This is a process that flows year to year. And then a little bit about advocacy and our dispute resolution under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and some resources. So the law says that at the beginning of each school year, the school district has an obligation to make sure that the IEP is ready to go on day 1. Oops, sorry. That it's ready to go on day 1. The lead education agency, or LEA, and the state education agency, or SEA, and are just going to make sure that, okay, here we go. And it must be in effect before special education. The IEP needs to be written, and before related services and special education can be provided for the child. And it's to be implemented as soon as possible following the meeting as described under, there's the statute of the law. Some people say, well, when does the IEP start? Starts immediately. It starts as soon as possible. If you're going to have a piece of equipment needs to be ordered, you might say, okay, it's going to take 2 weeks to get this piece of equipment. Then we'll start working on that goal. or if there's a busing schedule that needs to come in effect, it may take a week to get it in effect or something like that. But all in all, the IEP starts as soon as possible following the meeting. So that means right then or the next day. So just keep that in mind. It starts as soon as possible. The IEP of a student with a disability is, starts right away, and only delay if the team agrees to that delay for a reason, such as getting equipment, getting services lined up, but it needs to start soon. And if there's a delay in those services, then that needs to be talked about at the IEP meeting too. How long do you think this is going to take? And when can we get this started? And the general education and special education teachers share responsibility for implementing the IEP. Parent was asking me, well, who's responsible for the IEP? Said, the student doesn't hang up their, they don't put on their disability to go into the special ed room for an hour a day to get services in the resource room, and then on their way out, take off their disability and hang it up and go be a general education student without support. It doesn't work that way. The student who has an IEP has an IEP for all day. It doesn't matter if it says you get 60 minutes of special education services. What matters is you get the kind of supplementary aids and services that you need in the general ed classroom. You get the modifications that you need. Those minutes are for that specialized instruction, but you get the accommodations all day long. If you need accommodations all day long, you get support all day long. If you need support all day long, you get assistive technology all day long if you need it all day long. And the general education teacher is going to have a big chunk of that responsibility because the student presumably is going to be in general education classroom most of the time. But coordinating, and the special education teacher is going to coordinate with that general education teacher to make sure that that student is being educated in a way that student learns. So it does mean those related and support services providers, they're responsible too for implementation as defined under the individuals with education, the individualized education program. All team members are responsible to continually evaluate the effectiveness of the plan. So once again, and that includes parents, you want to look at, does this work? Are we making progress? How is the school year going? And that's why it's a continuous process. It's not just a meeting and then you're done for a year. It's a meeting to kind of make a plan. And then the rest of the year, it's the team members looking at, is this plan working? So it is expected that the IEP of a child be, start as soon as possible. There are exceptions if the meeting occurs during the summer or vacation period when services aren't being provided. This can happen. You can have a summer IEP meeting if that works out for your child. If you're new to you're moving in the summer and you move into a new school district, you want to get things set up, and the special ed director and the principal, they all agree, yeah, let's get things in place. So on the first day of school, services are provided. You may have a meeting in the summer that says, okay, when school starts, busing will be in place on the first day for your student who uses a wheelchair, and the classroom will be prepared. So it could happen. There are circumstances that require short delay, such as transportation or equipment being bought or equipment being arranged, like assistive technology equipment or something like that. The school district has a responsibility to communicate with parents and the district teachers and the student. Like, we need to really make sure that we're all working together. Services are provided as planned and documented in the IEP. That's why it's really important to have a real clear and concise IEP about what is really going to happen. What's that going to look like? What do you think the student's day is going to look like? Are services being provided during that time? That's why I think it's a really good idea for parents to, especially little kids, when you're starting school and you have an IEP, go, okay, what does that look like? What do the general ed students do from 8 to 8:30? Does my student need assistance during that time? And if so, what kind of assistance or help does my student need? We need to write that down. Okay, 8:30 to 9, what are they doing? Does my student need assistance? What does that look like? And do we need to write that down? So you can go all through the day looking at when the student is going to need support. He may need support during reading. He may not need support during recess. Or the child doesn't need support during reading and needs support during recess because it's a functional performance goal or a behavior goal that you're working on. So you need to look at the whole day, not just academics. It's when they walk in the door, it's walking down the hall, it's going to the bathroom, it's going to assembly, it's going to lunch, and it's going to recess, and it's math and English and science and all of that too. It's the whole day. You look at that. When does the student need support? When the student doesn't need support, what kind of support is that? Then you need to reflect those services in the IEP goal. And you need to look at that day. That's when the very first one, when we're looking at, documenting and planning the IEP. And during that meeting, you need to look at those 3 paragraphs that I believe have been posted. If they haven't, I'd be happy to get them to you. It's on least restrictive environment, supplementary aids and services, and placement. And you always look at the student as a general education student first. Place you start as the classroom the student would attend if that child did not have a disability, adding supplementary aids and services to that setting. That's why it's so important to look at the whole day. Okay, we're going to look at the progress that the student's making on their goals and how is that going to be monitored, because that's going to tell us, yeah, we guessed right. Because when we write a goal, we're writing a goal based on an educated guess. We're not writing a goal based on we've seen the future and we know where it's going. We're guessing. And so we need to make sure that we're writing down, is the student making progress, and is the student making enough progress that they're going to be able to meet their goal within that period of time. Our outside agencies going to provide transition services, this for an older child, and who's going to coordinate with that. Periodic reviews take place as scheduled, but at least every year, and that's that annual IEP meeting. But we want to make sure that the student at the school district has that responsibility to monitor, make sure that progress is being monitored in a way that makes sense for all the team members to understand, that when the student is transition age, that other agencies that provide supports for adults are included or invited to come to the meeting, and to make sure that those annual reviews take place. And right now, during the COVID pandemic, it's, throwing everybody for a loop, and people are going, well, here it is, but we're not in school, we're at home. There are a lot of Zoom IEP meetings happening, a lot of telephone IEP meetings happening, because they still have that responsibility to make sure that those reviews take place. And parents and students, you're responsible for communicating with the school about your child's progress and what works and what doesn't work as you see it, just as the school is responsible for communicating with you. It's really important that that open communication take place, because the child at home is sometimes a different child than the child at school. And sometimes you see behaviors at home that the school does not see, because the child is tired, it's the end of the day, they're very stressed, but at school they hold it together, and then they let the parents know their frustrations at the end of the day. And the school's going, well, we don't see that. Yeah, because they save it for the parents at home. Or you see behaviors at school that you don't see at home. So communication is really important, that everyone respectfully communicates with each other about the student. And the student needs to be taught, especially young ones and then older ones, they need to communicate whether the IEP is meaningful for them. And now in our state, there are many schools who have student-directed IEPs, especially for high school students. And I think this is a really good idea, because you need to be in charge of your life, and you need to learn how to communicate your needs. So having a student-led IEP is a great teaching tool for the student to learn to become a better self-advocate, but also to recognize what kind of support they need. So when they go into college or when they go into the workplace, they'll be able to communicate that and be comfortable about communicating that, knowing that it's okay, and that we all have support needs sometime during the day, just normally. So it's a really good experience to make sure that the student can communicate their needs, and they have a responsibility to do so. And know that you can call for an IEP review anytime you feel that the child is not making progress. And that's why that progress monitoring is so important, because you may be going during the year and go, this is not working. We really need to sit down and review this and come up with something else, because this approach doesn't work. Or, the service is not happening. We had written in there that speech was going to come, twice a week, and that's just not happening. So we really need to have a review IEP meeting to talk about that and see what's going on. Or we really need to change this kind of service, because I see that my child does not respond to this, but needs something else. Or the child is saying, I hate school, it doesn't work for me, I hate it. That's a big red flag, and you go, something's going on, we have to figure it out. So progress monitoring really is the ongoing process of collecting and analyzing data to determine the student's progress. It's not just a test on a piece of paper. It really is looking at attitude of the student. It really is looking at how the student's functioning in school. It really is looking at, are we making progress? Are we learning how to read? How much work can the student handle? And we're keeping track of that. And parents need to keep track of it too. Sometimes parents keep track through homework. And homework, you have math first thing in the morning. Yeah, I know how to do it. Get home, I don't have a clue how to do this, because I really didn't get it. And I'm not going to ask the teacher, because I don't want to be the dumb kid. So I'm going to say, yeah, I got it. And then fall apart with mom at home because I don't know how to do it. So that is data, and that is analyzing and collecting data. You can write on there, does not understand this concept, needs to be retaught. I mean, that's one way to kind of make a note about homework. So the teacher understands too, oh, didn't get it. Okay, understand, we need to go over this again. Progress monitoring should be used to make instructional and services decisions based on the student's performance. That's why it's so important to have this ongoing monitoring. And we want to make sure that that student is reaching a point where, yeah, you know, I get this, I understand what's going on, and I'm making progress. Progress monitoring is the responsibility of the team, not just one person, but the whole team. And at the time the IEP is developed, it must specify and document plans for progress monitoring, like what will be monitored, who's going to do the monitoring, when and where are we going to monitor, how it's going to be conducted, and how will that data be reported. So if you have like a reading goal, that's pretty easy. You know, the reading teacher is going to monitor words per minute or comprehension, and she's, you know, it's going to be conducted during our reading time every 3 weeks. And we're keeping track and we're keeping, you know, that real clear data so that we can review it and look at it together to see if we're on the right track. If you have a behavior goal or if you have a functional performance goal, it needs to be monitored too. And sometimes it's not as strictly monitored, or you don't have such really concrete, you know, evidence. But you need to really talk about that. How are we going to monitor this goal of being on task? How are we going to monitor this goal of expressing frustration in a different way? So you need to talk about that as a team so you can work together as a team. How are we going to track anxiety in school? That's a big one. So goals and progress monitoring. We want to provide the data to assist in making those decisions about the students. You know, it really does guide how we instruct. It really does guide what does the student need to learn and how are we going to accommodate the learning and how are we going to make sure that the student can be successful in school and move forward. We need to challenge them enough, but we don't need to frustrate them so much that they give up. So as a team, we're going to talk about that. And sometimes it can be a challenge and sometimes it can be really easy. But as a team, we're going to look at that together to make sure that we understand how the student learns and how we can move forward with the learning in a really productive way. Well, the benefits of it are that parents and students know what's expected, but also it's that conversation that goes on between the parents and the teachers. And when you have that organized record of the student's performance, you can see what's happening. You know, he's just not getting subtraction. You know, that it doesn't make sense. He doesn't know how to borrow and carry things. So we need to, it's right here. It's real black and white. I see what's going on. And it needs to be an easy to understand way for parents to see, not just a checklist of first quarter, check, made progress, second quarter, check, made progress, third quarter, check, made progress, fourth quarter, oh, didn't meet the goal. What? You said he was making progress. Yeah, but not enough progress. Well, where was he not making progress? Well, I'm not quite sure right now, but we did check it back at the beginning. No, it needs to be information you can understand because it needs to be that working data collection. That's what progress monitoring is. It's data collection all year long. And that's going to help us make better decisions for moving forward. Sometimes we have conflict and sometimes we need to, you know, look at, okay, boy, you know, they just aren't hearing what I'm saying, or I disagree with their approach, or I'm not seeing what they're saying. What are we going to do? Well, we do have a way to resolve conflict now under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. There's informal resolution, mediation, due process, and state complaint. But we also have one more that is an alternative that we'll talk about too. The informal resolution is, okay, we're going to sit down, talk with the teacher and the principal and whoever the problem is with, the speech therapist, the special ed administrators. We're gonna meet outside of the IEP meeting to talk about this one thing that is really standing in the way of our student learning and performing. So it's called another meeting with the teacher, basically, or a teacher and the principal, or how can we make, or the special ed teacher and the general ed teacher can never find time to coordinate with each other, and now everything's falling apart, or the school doesn't want to have just a general, teacher conference with the parent. They just put it off on the special ed teacher always, and the parent doesn't get to meet with the teacher. You can meet with the teacher. It's a general education student first, a general education student who receives services through the IEP. So sometimes there are all kinds of issues that come up that an informal resolution can take care of, because sometimes it's just a misunderstanding of what their roles were or what the responsibilities were for one teacher with another teacher or something like that. And they just need to sit down and talk with the parent about it because it's becoming very frustrated. Or the parent is saying, you were not listening to me at all. I'm telling you things, you're not listening, my student's getting really frustrated. That's when you need to have this informal resolution. Okay, let's sit down and look at it. You can call for another IEP meeting anytime you feel like you need to change something on the IEP. Often that informal resolution meeting, it's something to discuss about, the special ed teacher was rude to me and hurt my feelings. So we need to talk about that, or telling me I call all the time. And now I'm having jets fly over. So it's always something when you're working at home, isn't it? So the IEP meetings, that's kind of the next step after you have that informal resolution. If you need to sit down and have an IEP meeting to change some aspect of the IEP. It may just be, one thing, it may be it's several things, but you can have a meeting anytime you feel like that's necessary. Schools, districts are required to provide an IEP meeting review at least once every 365 days. That's the minimum. That's their legal requirement. You can have more than that if you need that. Informal resolution begins at that lowest level, be polite, but direct, explain the problem as concretely as you can, not just on 2 Thursdays ago, she saw me walking down the hall and went into the other room because she doesn't want to talk to me. Well, and maybe you want to think about that. Is this a problem with the child, or is this a problem with that can't, how important is this problem and whose problem is it, basically? But you can ask for help. We need better way for communication. I feel like I'm not being heard. I feel like, we need a way that I can ask questions and get answers that are in a timely way. So how often are you going to, how long does it take for you to answer a question? Maybe a day, maybe 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, but give me a timeline. Ask for data or other objective materials that are relevant to the problem being addressed. So, you tell me he's misbehaving all day long. You're calling me to come and get him because he's having a problem. Why isn't he having a problem in English? It's only in math. When is the problem occurring? Is it right before lunch? Have you checked his blood sugar levels? What's going on? Ask for that data and to, so that you have something to look at. Keep a focus on what the child needs to make progress. This is really important because sometimes we get sidetracked into the "you don't like me" part of it, or "I don't like you" part of it. Has nothing to do with the child. So keep the focus on the child. Or sometimes the administration of a district gets in the way of the progress of the child. So is this an administrative issue or is this the child's issue? So sometimes you just have to really look at what is going on and make a decision about how do we move forward from here. Keep the focus as much as possible on objective information. So you want to look at that data that's being presented to you, and you want to look at it in a way that makes sense for you to understand this data. And be as objective as possible. Sometimes it's hard for parents to keep the objectivity when they're so emotionally involved with the child, and they need to be emotionally involved with the child. That's the most important person in the world for them. And this is very, very important that you keep the focus and be as objective as you possibly can. Put your business hat on. It's a business meeting. This is a business, and you need to kind of focus in a business mindset of how we can get this accomplished. Mediation, if that doesn't work and you're really hitting a big brick wall and you need somebody to help you focus on how do we get past this obstacle, you might ask for mediation. And mediation is free to the school, it's free to you, and it's voluntary. So if the district says, no, I don't want to mediate, then voluntarily they can say that. Or you can say, no, I don't want to mediate. But just know that it's a good thing to try. Mediators are appointed through the Colorado Department of Education. They are not employees of the Department of Education, but they subcontract with them for this service. And they generally are, sometimes they're administrative law judges acting in the role of mediator. And sometimes they're mediators who mediate like rent disputes or things like that, professional mediators. But what they can do is a good mediator will conduct the conversation between the school district and the parent, and they will help each other be heard. A mediator does not make decisions, and a mediator is to be impartial. And you can have mediation pretty quickly. So you can have it in a location that is neutral too. And if you come to a written agreement or a mediated agreement, it is legally binding. It's binding arbitration. But you have 3 days to think about it, and the school district has 3 days to think about it, and you can withdraw your signature within 3 days if you think about it and you can't live with it. It's also a very confidential discussion. So you're not going to go say, well, the principal said that the teacher really screwed up. You're not going to tell anybody that, and the principal's not going to go, oh, that parent is the real troublemaker. No, it's confidential, but we want to have a way for two parties to actually talk to each other and find a way to work together. Due process is a much more formal process. Due process is administrative law judge will be the person who hears the due process conduct the court. It is court-like. You do promise to tell the truth. You answer questions. You don't give commentary. You answer questions directly. And the law is, are you following the law? It's much more legalized. Generally, the school district will have an attorney present for a due process hearing, and we suggest that parents have an attorney also. Parents do not have to have an attorney present at that time. Parents can represent themselves, but just know the school district will have an attorney, and they're allowed to have an attorney in that case. And it needs to be according to how the IEP is written, not the inferences of the IEP, but actually what's on black and white on the paper. So if it says at teacher discretion, services will be delivered, and parent says, well, they never delivered any services, then they said, well, it was teacher's discretion. They never thought services were needed. So they are not out of compliance with the IEP or something like that. So you just need to be careful about that. And that's why a good document, a good IEP document written where everybody really understands what's going forward on this, and you have those discussions during the development of the IEP, it keeps you out of due process. It's best for resolving big differences, like whether the child is getting a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. Often placement is something, that people go due process over. And are the services being delivered that are written on the IEP? Well, if they're not, then the judge can order compensatory services, and that's to make up for services that were not delivered that should have been delivered. So you really need to, look at that, and you can't ask for money. It's not that kind of process that you can ask for money, but you can ask for services. A judge can order services and can say, this is what needs to happen in the future. So a well-written IEP and good communication with your school is going to keep you out of this very formal process of due process. And it takes time. And there's a formal timeline with the due process. When you notify them that you're going to file for due process, and then 15 days in, 10 days for that, then 15 days in, school district says, we would like to have a resolution meeting. It's not a resolution meeting, it's not mediation, it's a meeting to see if we can resolve it without going to process. And then if you can't, they've got more time after that to actually have the due process meeting, and that meeting can be delayed and that kind of thing. So it can be very time consuming to do a formal due process meeting. Sometimes you have to do that. I mean, it's there for a reason, but it's there for a serious reason. Then you can have the appeal process to the due process, and this is going to take time. That resolution session, has to precede it, and then if a decision comes back that parents don't like, then parents have a year from that date to file for an appeal. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. And parents, if a parent files due process against a school district, then the parent has the burden of proof that they have to prove that the IEP offered by the school district did not offer their child a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. School districts too can file due process against parents, but that is extremely rare. And in that case, the burden of proof would be on the school district. So just, the process is there, it's available. However, it's something that you very seriously take your time to consider. A state complaint is a written process, and it's a form that can be filled out about generally services that were said that they were going to do that didn't happen. So the whole IEP team agreed okay, here is our IEP. We're going to agree that this is how we're going to present this education for the student, and here's how we're going to do it, then it doesn't happen, or some part of it doesn't happen. And then the parent can file a written complaint to the Colorado Department of Education saying they said they were going to give speech therapy 3 times a week. He said speech therapy once a month or something like that. So people agreed on paper, this is how it's going to do, and it didn't happen. So filing a complaint will initiate an investigation by a state complaint officer at the Colorado Department of Ed. And the Department of Ed has about 3 or 4 state complaint officers who read the state complaints, then let you know when they're going to, if they accept that state complaint and they'll go forward with it, or you don't have a state complaint in their opinion. And so that has a timeline to it also. But it's an easier way to kind of document your needs and document what's going on with the school district, and in your opinion, what's happening and what's not happening in the school district. Then if you, it's best when there are implementation problems, like we're not following the IEP that we said we would do, or something like that. State can order compensatory services and teacher training. They can change policies, things like that. So that's something to just know is available, and it works pretty well, I think, or has worked pretty well in the past. And why is this all important? It really is important that we advocate for our student and for our family. We need to participate, not just be merely involved. It is, after all, the parent who knows their child first and knows their child best. Our relationship with our sons and daughters is personal and spans a lifetime. Corey Moore was a parent who helped originate the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act back in the beginning. And why is it important? It's important, it's important because children do better in schools, and schools get better and stay in school longer when parents are involved. Students understand that schools are, education is important when parents demonstrate that education is important. And we want to motivate students to learn and to learn well. And plus, schools are community agencies, I guess you could say. And it's really important that parents be involved in their community, in their school and their school agency. Families support schools and they hold them accountable. And when schools understand that parents are involved and parents really want to support not just their child in school, but all the children in school, then their opinion becomes more important. We encourage parents to get involved in the parent accountability, the PTA, the PAC, whatever it is, that parent community committee that helps make decisions about the school district. Get involved with that if you can. It's important. And your opinion and becomes important to the school district. And, the more parents are involved, then students and children's lives change for the better. And advocacy goals. Your goal as an advocate is not to win. Your goal as an advocate is to build positive relationships with your school district and with the teachers who are working and the staff that's working at the school. You want to build those positive relationships because that's going to pay off for your child. Then you want to participate in those decision-making levels where schools are required to have parent input and schools are required to see what parents need, to make sure that students' needs are met, not just your student, but all the students in the school, and to build those community partnerships. We want you to know that IDEA, or Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and how that IEP process works. When you know how it works, then you can have a stronger voice in the conversation around the meetings, such as we need to look at least restrictive environment. We need to look at our supplementary aids and services. We need to look at our placement and understand that you don't change a student's placement out of general education simply because the student needs modified work. So sometimes they get in, school districts get in the habit of, well, we can't modify that, or if he does, he has to go to that special room. That's not what the law says. And say, no, let's read this together and talk about it. Know what goals you have for your child. These goals are going to be, or could be, different than, just the school district's goals. Your goal probably is going to be something like, I want my child to be a happy adult who lives in the community, who can take care of himself, who can, function as a good adult and have a job. I want him to be happy. That's a parent goal. And it's important to have those goals. And it's important for you to express those goals to the school. Sometimes schools get real focused on, okay, 1 year progress, or just what can we do right now in this short period of time. It's a bigger picture, and the parents have a bigger picture goal. You need to stay in communication with the school and have that ongoing conversation and know how we can, learn to talk to each other and say, communication's breaking down. I'm going to ask for mediation, not because I'm really mad, not because I want to get them, because I want to build a way to communicate more effectively with the school. And if something isn't working, you have to speak up. There's one thing that I always told my kids, there's one thing your teachers cannot do, and it's read your mind. So if you have something that's not working for you, you need to speak up. And I don't know many good mind readers out there. So if something's not working, speak up and get support when you need it. We're in this together, and especially during this very difficult time when we really are kind of socially separate from each other or distanced, but we're in it together. And this is a new ballgame for the schools too. We were thrown into this world of everybody's being educated at home. All of a sudden, all of us were thrown into it. Nobody had really planned on this, and a lot of teachers are teaching their classroom, but they're also teaching their own kids at home too. And a lot of parents are going, I'm now the teacher. I know what I do. I know accounting. I know my business. What am I supposed to, how do I teach reading? So now it's a challenge for all of us to work together to get the support we need when you don't know how to do something or present a lesson to a child at home. Ask the teacher, ask the school, say, how are we getting through this, and how are we moving forward? And give the kids a break too. Right now, this is, it's hard for them to make that adjustment, especially if they've been in a classroom with that classroom structure to all of a sudden being at home. And we just need to get support for everyone, knowing that we're in this together, and how can we work through this together. So we have a few minutes. Do we have any questions, Pam?
We do, Shirley. Thank you so much. The question, okay, sorry about that. The question is, can you provide examples of a functional performance related goal?
That's a good question.
Yes.
Okay, a functional performance related goal might be that the student with autism is going to make eye contact with students and initiate a conversation um, 3 times a day. Maybe it's something like that. Or a functional performance goal might be that a student who really is struggling in math and the behavior is when math starts, the student starts crying because math is so hard and the student cries and is getting physically upset to the point where then the student is going to the nurse's office every day during math, that we're going to approach it in a different way and that we're going to, prepare the student for math and we're going to give him some alternatives to relieve his anxiety through different, you can get a drink of water, you can take a walk with carry an envelope down to the desk, to the office. We're going to give you one problem per page and somebody's going to help you, do that problem until you're comfortable with it. Maybe it's something like that. So give us a call at Peak and we've got we'd be happy to strategize with you about particular behaviors in looking at how you can measure that goal. And so there are great charts out there for measuring behavioral goals, but also looking at, is this realistic? And we might mention that we're having conversations that matter tomorrow evening with somebody who's really in tune with behaviors in kids. Look at Peak's website for that. And her name's Kiki McGow, and she's a great behavior, person to ask those questions.
Thank you, Shirley.
Another question.
One more question. Do children supported by 504s have the same options for resolution, i.e., due process and state complaint?
Section 504, the Rehab Act of 1973 is not an education law. It is a civil rights law. There is a procedure that you can use. It's not due process, but it's not due process. Informally, you can ask for a mediation, and or you can ask to resolve this somehow. But there is if you have a Section 504 complaint, which is discrimination because of the disability, such as a student has a 504 that says that that student has extended time, and you encounter a teacher that says, no, not in my class, that's discrimination because the Section 504 team has determined that, or coordinator and parent have determined that the student needs that because of their dyslexia, and it takes them longer to process. And if it's denied them after it's been determined that, yeah, you really need this, then the parent can contact the Office of Civil Rights and file an Office of Civil Rights complaint. And that is not through the Colorado Department of Education, but is through the Office of Civil Rights. So there is a process for dispute resolution kind of for Section 504. It is not due process. IDEA is an education law. Section 504 is a civil rights law. There is a great movie on Netflix right now called Crip Camp. And it really is the story of the disability movement back in the 70s. And Judy Heumann, who was, she's still alive, and she's a very active disability rights activist. And it really is about Section 504 and how that came about. So if you have the chance to watch that movie, Crip Camp, I would suggest it. Anything else?
No, thank you, Shirley.
Well, we have additional resources here. from the Office of Special Education, that ida.ed.gov. That's the whole law, but it's pretty well, you can navigate that somewhat if you type in if you're having a need or something. That's where you can find the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And then the Center for Parent Information and Resources, Parent Center Hub. You can look up all kinds of information on that website on behavior, on functional behavior plans, on writing goals, on looking at functional behavior assessments, and then functional behavior goals, things like that. That's a great place to look up information about anything related to special education and IDEA. And then in our, times now, COVID-19 resources for school, at the Colorado Department of Education, they have a great resource list at their website, Safe Schools. And it's a new part of our life that's going to be with us for a long time. So I would really suggest that you look at that. And because IEPs are going to be a little different this year, but they still have the obligation to be respectful to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. However, with our safe distancing and classrooms and how schools are going to be functioning, I would suggest that you might want to call your director of special education, and at the Colorado Department of Education's website, you can, they have a link on how to find your special ed director, and here's the link to that. Feel free to call them up, feel free to talk to them, because they want to have parent input, because all of us are kind of figuring this out together. So don't be shy with, talking with your school and talking with your district and talking with your director of special education on how those related services are going to be provided for your student. And Pam, you want to take over now?
Yes, thank you, Shirley. As soon as we are able to add captions to this webinar recording, we will post it on our website. And to request a certificate of completion, please email Pam Christie at pchristy@peakparent.org. That's PCHRISTY@peakparent.org. Thank you to our wonderful presenter, Shirley, and to everyone attending. We hope you join our last webinar in this series, Transition Grade to Grade, on May 6th. As Shirley mentioned, if you have any questions, please contact any parent advisor at Peak Parent Center. This is our website, www.peakparent.org. 719-531-9400 is our number, and the email address is parentadvisor@peakparent.org. Next slide. We offer many resources here at Peak. We have webinars, we have parent advisors in Spanish and English, we have regional parent connectors, we offer workshops across the state, we have a Speak Out blog. You really should look at those. The last two have been very current and powerful. And save the date for Peak's annual conference on inclusive education, February 18th and 19th, 2021 in Denver, Colorado. Peak is a nonprofit, and we rely on donations from generous donors like you to be able to deliver webinars like this. Please consider making a donation online at www.peakparent.org. Again, as you exit the webinar, please take just a moment to complete our evaluation survey, as we value your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email, again, with the information on how you can access this link once it's been closed captioned. We are offering dispute resolution webinar series. It started on April 21st, so please go to Peak's website for details. And as Shirley mentioned, we are offering 3 conversations that matter, and those will be on our website. If you'd like to sign up for those, they are the next 3 weeks, April through May. On behalf of Peak Parent Center and today's presenter, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
And thank you for the tolerance of knowing that we're working from home and we have dogs.
Yes. Goodbye, everybody.